Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. One of the things that I try to get a handle on when I first initiate a discussion with prospects is um, the culture of the organization, and part of that is because we don't want to work with folks that are just looking for compliance. We really are part of our DNA, if you will, is to help small and mid-sized businesses actually increase their security posture. And I've mentioned this before on this podcast, but the concept of compliance is equal to security is kind of a mantra among the information security professionals. It doesn't go the other way. I'm a firm believer that if you have a strong security program based and rooted in one or more of the standards out there, like NIST or ISO or so forth, then you're going to just about meet compliance right out the gate. There's going to be some nuances and all of that associated with the particular framework that you're working against, or that you're trying to work towards, rather, I should say. But what I mean by culture is that there's really, I think, a couple of aspects with regards to culture. And I can divide that. The first one is the executive side, and then the second one would be all staff, all personnel. So from the executive side, an information security program cannot be complete without executive buy-in. In fact, the less executive buy-in and knowledge there is, the less effective an information security program will be. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think that it all distills down to the basic truth that information security is a business issue, not a technology issue. And if executive management and the board of directors aren't paying information security due diligence, then information security really doesn't become a priority in the organization. You have a issue with regards to being able to gain buy-in. A lot of times it's difficult already for a CISO or virtual CISO to make the case, if you will, that a certain tool is needed or other resource. And there are ways to bolster that, for example, like through a quantitative risk analysis like FAIR. But ultimately, I always say that the CISO's job, primary responsibility, is to provide enough information so that the executive management and the C-suite can make risk-informed decisions on information security. But if they're not really interested in making risk-informed decisions from a cultural standpoint, and they look at it as just a impediment to business, just take care of that sort of thing, that's a very difficult aspect of culture to work with an information security program. And then the culture of the rest of the staff, well, part of that feeds up from the from upper management and the in particular, I guess some from the board too, but mainly upper management. As upper management goes, so goes the rest of the organization. And if you have upper management that doesn't really focus on information security, then you almost have the, how can you expect the staff to? And again, sometimes I think you see this in organizations where they think that IT is just responsible for all information security, and that's one of the most dangerous conclusions to make. Staff should be very much aware of information security threats. That's why awareness training is not just a check-a-box thing, but particularly not only the annual training to keep them reminded as to what some of the more common and more risky threats are, but also practicing and exercising that muscle memory with phishing exercises during the year is very important. And of course, there's different testing for different training for different roles. But the employee or the consultant or what have you, they have to care. They have to have some sort of skin in the game, so to speak. They have to understand that this is for the better good of the company. And again, if executive management treats it differently, then there's no reason to expect that the staff will treat it differently as well. They won't see it as a business necessity for the company. So I look for these things, and depending upon what the level is, I might decline potential opportunity, or I might have already by that point in time determined a strategy on how to adjust the culture, so to speak, to get it to become more accepting of risk management from an information security perspective. And so how do you do that? In my years of experience, the best way to do that is to start out from the idea that you don't tell a person what they need to do without explaining to them why they need to do it. So the simple example with phishing exercises is it's not punitive. I don't think that there should ever be any sort of punitive action laid on those who fail phishing exercises unless it's a constant, repeatable offense. People will make mistakes. That's just part of being human. But if they're not doing anything to try to learn from those mistakes, then that becomes an issue. But first time failing, second time failing within a period of a year, well, I don't think that punitive actions does much good. Doesn't really help. And ultimately, we want to try to help the situation. We don't want to make it worse. But if they understand that, well, this is a way that the bad guys get into the network, and if they get into the network, they can do bad things like encrypt. They can cause the company to temporarily suspend operations while they recover. And during that time, then the company can lose revenue, and that could ultimately affect the employment status of everybody within the company. And then you kind of build a little bit on that. Well, there's the skin in the game concept. Of course, the best employees are those that, and staff, I use the term staff to include employees and contractors and volunteers. And just the best staff are those that believe in the mission of the company and necessarily aren't in it for a paycheck. They really believe in what they're doing. The organization has a good culture, not just information security, but all around. People, they go to work, they have fun. That's one of our guiding principles, if you will, at CISO, is that you have to have fun. Because if you're not having fun at what you're doing, I think fundamentally that's a problem. Coming from somebody who has been in times in my life where I didn't particularly have fun with what I was doing at the time. So we try to sell it as a benefit to the staff that to be more information security aware. Of course, we can't go to every single staff member and explain that, but we certainly can try to emphasize to the management and the higher ups the necessity for turning that culture around. Now, you can also measure some effects of this. Some you can't, some you can. You can certainly use, getting back to the phishing training statistics, there are platforms out there, for example, we're a KnowBe4 partner. KnowBe4 tracks the status of not only the courses that they've taken, but also what they've done, what the staff has done as far as clicking on various emails and so forth. It creates a risk rating for them, and you can then see who might be more riskier and can focus your efforts on those people. culture is not one of those things that you can change very easily. It is one of those examples of turning an ocean liner really slowly, and it has to follow. You can't turn the internal culture without buy-in from executive management. And I would suppose that probably the worst scenario, and I've seen this before, is where those responsible for information security, and a lot of this is in the IT space at that point in time, don't want to have that contact with upper management. They actually want to separate and work autonomously because they believe that, well, I'm not really sure, but I think the culture is like that. They know that there are issues, and then they don't want executive management to know that. And that sort of an organization is going to have long-term problems, most likely. So you try to turn the culture slowly. You measure it with various things, the phishing exercises, the number of viral infections you have, those sorts of things, and you want to make sure, of course, that you've got a strong policy suite in place, and that the folks understand it, they sign off on it, and you test the procedures that they're doing to make sure that they're not skipping over stuff. Because again, sometimes people will think that, well, I'll just skip over something to make things more efficient. I'll give you an example of that from my first job outside of being a paperboy. I worked at a Burger King in Binghamton, New York, and the rule there was never work on more than 2 burgers at a time. Well, I was 16 at the time, and I knew everything back then. I must have forgotten an awful lot, because I remember when I was 16, I knew everything, absolutely everything. And so it was during a lunch period, lunchtime, of course, it's busier at lunch, more people are eating, it's Burger King. And I was making 4 burgers at once. And the manager, I still remember his full name, I'll just say his first name, Scott. Scott comes over, and he's just like, my gosh, why are you doing this? Where do we get these people from? And he was upset because apparently there was somebody from Burger King Central doing an audit or a spot check or something, and I guess that failed the manager because I wasn't following proper procedures. And I didn't know or understand the why. I just figured that the why that you weren't supposed to work on more than 2 burgers at once is because on average people couldn't handle that, but that, well, I can handle it, I can definitely do it, it's fine. I mean, hey, I knew everything. I was 16, I was Superman. And I didn't come to realize until later, I never verified this, but I'm assuming that the reason is that there have been studies done that the more that you work on, the more meals you work on at one time, the greater the chance, probably goes up exponentially, that you're going to get one or more of those orders wrong, one or more of those burgers wrong. And so it's a corporate policy that is rooted in studies and in logic. And if somebody had just decided to tell me as a 16-year-old, not just the what, but the why, I wouldn't have done that. I mean, I really was a smart kid at that point in time, not smart enough to realize that even though I thought I knew everything, I didn't. But I was smart enough, and I would have been like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. The same analogy applies to information security. Again, if you tell somebody the why to do something, it may look like that I shouldn't have to do this extra step with regards to, say, transferring a file. Then it'll click, and it'll click and it'll stick. Actually, I kind of like that. I think that's going to be a new saying that I'm gonna trademark. It'll click and it'll stick. So, to summarize for today, culture, very important in information security. It's one of those soft things. There's soft skills involved with information security. Certainly, there are others like communication, relationships. We'll talk about probably in another episode. But culture is a foundational requirement, good culture for an information security program. So, again, thank you for listening, and stay secure.